You know, for a tournament that many came in saying didn't matter in any way, shape, or form and was a Mickey Mouse tournament, this actually turned out to be a pretty influential week for the headlines, for narrative shifting ever so slightly, even if it doesn't have a long term impact. This is the value if you're going to have multiple international events. Luckily, of having a diverse result compared to expectations, like this is the benefit of that. Had the LCK won all three times, yeah, it might have been a problem. But we're not in that world. And I want to know your thoughts, not just my own, on your overreactions to First Stand and the first international event of the year because, oh, there's some stuff to talk about. I'm sure you'll bring it up. So let me dive into some of these. First off, starting with Horizon Cast, he said, the LPL has and will always be the LEC Kryptonite for reasons that go beyond just stats. I think that the LEC will continue to be outplayed by the LPL teams until the LPL degrades as a region. This is one of those stylistic matchups that is always interesting because those that have been around long enough remember when the memes existed and they're starting to resurface now of like, oh, G2 is just the LPL 3 seed or LPL 4 seed, whatever you want to call it, because it very much is an LPL playstyle, which works well in terms of pushing the slower Korean styles out of their comfort zone. But then whenever you go to face somebody like Bin, it's like, okay, well, unfortunately, like, we don't have a Bin. We're working on it. By all means, we're getting there. Like BB held his own in that series, but like Bin and June just like took over, and it was a night and day difference. Like their tempo that they're playing with in team fights, their coordination, like the craziness that they are willing to go to relative to some of the ones that we saw from G2. It's different. They play like that all year. G2 like tries to refine that domestically, and by all means, again, it's getting there. It's not to diminish anything that's being done on the LEC side, but it has been a problem for a bit. But it's why I think international events are so interesting if this dynamic continues, though, because the LEC or at least G2 can like step up and potentially beat some of the Korean teams, which then opens the road potentially for the LPL. I mean, that was one of the keys to 2018, 2019 was Europe coming in and causing some upsets over Korea. It opened the door for the LPL to close it at some point in their own favor. So yeah, I agree. I think the LEC as of right now is going to continue to struggle, even though they've gotten wins off of like some of the lower seeds from China. I think the number one seed team, just for whatever reason, specifically Bin as well, is just always going to be a problem for them. And it's tough, but like it's still amazing that they even got to a final in the first place. That surpassed all expectations we could have. I'm going to combine two takes here because I think they're both related to each other in the same way. Colomer said, and if you don't know who Colomer is, he was involved with Old Miss Esports. Let me check. Who's he with now? Head coach for Citadel as well, who's in the NACL, and then Marn, who's part of the LCS report. So Colomer says, only way Western teams will compete with China and Korea is developing in-region talent, having long-term plans, and not hard resetting every split, and being willing to find specific angles in draft style that work for them. Any other way is completely chalked. Martin said, I'm 50-50 on whether this is an overreaction. If I was a top NA team, I would hit the kill switch and start developing talent like FlyQuest is doing, even if it means short-term pain, i.e. abysmal Worlds performance on home soil. The players on the current top teams aren't good enough. I agree heavily with both of them. It's one of the reasons why we've seen Brazil start to level up a little bit more. Europe as well, like embracing the domestic talent that they have. You don't see G2 coming out here and overly importing. Now, that's not to say that there aren't teams that can't import and help lift the level of the region, because by all means, you bring some of these guys over. Like, I wouldn't not ever take Core JJ in this region, 100% would. But the problem is, especially on bottom teams or even like middle to some top teams, you just can't be importing every single chance that you get. We have to have a very healthy mix of homegrown talent with some select few imports that really embrace the culture and identity of what we want to set for ourselves. But you have to have domestic talent that is able to level up on the scale. Also, the communication gap alone is just insane. Colomer points it out with draft too. Like we saw it with G2 and with BLG that like they have a style that they want to go with. And look, there are going to be times whenever you embrace a style like that and you face mismatches that are just really hard to beat, but you didn't pick the tools in terms of the roster that you built to be able to do that. And that's fine. And there is a luck of the draw element like that maybe you just get a good draw and you go on a run based on teams that you're better fit to play against. But most importantly, with all this, is just we need to be developing North American talent. We have to. It's more relatable for audiences to buy in on. Like, I, as a fan, can buy into somebody who grew up living a life similar to what I grew up doing. There's a relatability of somebody who is naturally from where we were that you can tell a story with, that you can build a brand around, and just more importantly, like, it gives hope to everybody else around that eventually you can work your way up from nothing here. It has to be done. And I agree, a lot of the talent at the top for North America is just not cutting it right now. And we don't have the amount of younger talent here because they keep going over to Europe and go to other systems because we import overtaking them. Like, it's a problem. We have to flush through that talent, and orgs need to be more willing to take risks and develop that talent and give them the right amount of time. You can't just cut them after one split, i.e. Scary Jerry. Sniper had a little bit longer time, but 100 Thieves never gave that coaching staff the resources that they needed. And Dokla comes into that roster and it's like, oh, we're going to develop Sniper. Immediately replaces them. Like, I'm not going to keep going into that. I've beat it to death on this channel. But the point remains, yes, you need to give these rookies talent. Think about what people would have done with Labrov after last season. I know I mentioned in a separate video that Skumon did get some shit for lacking a little bit of a clutch factor. Obviously nowhere near as much as Labrov, and Labrov James getting some of the memes his way. It goes a long way, and it's just healthier. Like, I don't know what else to say. Bok Choi said, my overreaction is if the tournament was twice as long, there's no way G2 beats GenG. Here's the flaw with thinking of this. And I see this all the time with other tournaments, especially in golf, because golf is one of those things, for those of you that don't know, you go to a course for 1 week and then you go to a different course in future weeks. And many pros make the argument of, I have more time at this course or more time to like flush out and like learn the greens, learn the course. I would have won this tournament by 10 strokes, easy. But the flaw with that is everybody else around you gets that same amount of time as well. And there's a potential ceiling argument that like we don't know about. Like, the thing with G2 is like they don't get like practice against GenG and BLG and these top teams consistently. If they're scrimming against them more often for a longer period of time, there's an argument that G2 scales to an even higher level than what GenG could. I know people are going to take it as a fluke, but like, you cannot look at these tournaments and say, oh, if it was longer, if there was double elam or all these things, like this might not have happened or this would have happened. One, win on the day. That's the first thing. I know it's not related to this take, but the amount of people that I always see bring up that point is just annoying. Win on the day. And two, you don't know. We have zero clue how things would have played out had you been given more time, because other teams could have stepped up. Maybe Lion gets more shit together. We don't know. So I don't like theorizing about things that just simply don't exist and aren't in a reality that we're in. Like, it's fun to like think about things that could be possible, but this tournament's never going to be 2 weeks longer. So that just is what it is. Oh boy, Toasty. This is in fact not GenG's year, and they will be moving on from Chovy and Canyon after this year. I refuse to go with like the bald bets in any way, shape, or form, because I'm already losing my hair a little bit. Like, it's slowly going. I ain't at caps level yet, but we're getting there. Never gonna take a bet like that. I want to enjoy my hair while I have it, and then once I become a father, I'm sure I'll just lose it naturally. But I'd be willing to bet every dollar that I don't have that Chovy is never leaving GenG. Like, unless he chooses to. Okay, let me strike that. If Chovy ever chooses to move on, so say like Faker retires from T1 and Chovy wants to go become the face of T1, fine. Like, that's different. GenG is never moving on from Chovy. Ever. They might change the entire cast around him. And I really think that like a sports psychologist would go a really long way for this GenG squad. Look, I'm not saying that G2 is a better team than them. To me, at least, G2 had a fantastic day. GenG had a little bit of a bad day. Do I think GenG still beats G2 more times than not? As of right now, yes, I would say that. However, there is, like, we've seen this too many times from GenG that they keep collapsing. And the fact that it's happening earlier in the year now is a worrying sign that if you're a GenG fan, you're looking at this like, oh no. And it's impossible to theorize, but I mentioned this on Sunday, or well, Saturday, when talking about like 2018, 2019, and kind of thinking about how some of the cracks that existed within Korean esports back then could possibly be happening now. Obviously, there hasn't been a mass exodus of Korean talent the same way we saw back then, but it feels like many of the pros that are at the top kind of have been there for a bit. Like, you look at T1, okay? They've lost pieces year over year. And they've kind of gone to other teams as you've distributed out what was seen as like one of the best rosters assembled at the time. That's not saying they would still be at that skill caliber now, but you do spread the talent out a little bit more. And you bring back some familiar faces other than like Diablo really working his way up, and now Smash obviously like working his way up as well. But it's not like there's a ton of new talent on these top teams. The same way you look at like Europe, for example. You have Kalist, Labrov, Skumond. Busio is still a newer talent to the space, relatively speaking. Like, it's the next generation coming in where it doesn't feel like Korea has cycled through that as well. And we might possibly be at the end of one of those like life cycle periods for Korea where more turnover and newer faces do need to be brought in and more risks need to be taken. But they've kept winning worlds for the last 3 years, so there's no reason to, 4 years. No. 5? 4. No reason to take risks on that. So I don't think GenG's moving on from Chovy, but I could see a world where they like kind of go the opposite direction, like go super young rather than like super talented. Maybe I don't know. All the players on that roster are still the best in their individual lanes compared to everybody in the LCK. So I don't even know. I'm just bullshitting at this point. I'm just raising the warning flag now that something feels like it could possibly be off with Korea that maybe we'll see come MSI and Worlds. Who knows? Carlos Toro says, don't think it's an overreaction necessarily, but best event format for the least important and most useless event of the year. Also, G2 is not actually a good metric for the West, and more so EU. Any other team, EU shits the bed instead. I will save the second half of that take for one that I know is coming that I specifically bookmarked. But the first half, best event format for the least important and most useless event of the year. See, this is why we can't have nice things in LoL esports, is because we finally get a third international event. And I deal with it all the time. People saying like, oh, prioritize domestic play, 2 splits instead of 3. If we could get results like this, where you have more teams besides just Korea winning, more international events is 100% worth it and more entertaining. I don't get this idea that it's like a useless event. It's part of the Golden Road. It's the beginning of the year. I get it's not MSI. It's never going to have the prestige at Worlds, but it can work to be its own thing if we allow it to. And I'd say this was a very successful event. Was it the best format? I think the formats are subjective, personally. I love single elim. I know that's a controversial opinion. Some people are like, oh, MSI is the best format. It has double elim and all this. I don't like double elim. I don't. Not within League. I love well flushed out group stages. I love like proper seeding going into a single elimination bracket where you get a lot of play in that seeding phase that really kind of sets the tone, and then you lock it in for single elim. But this idea that everything has to be the most important thing in the world. If it's not Worlds, it doesn't matter. Like, you're gonna take the fun out of everything and slowly kill not only your interest but everyone else's interest in the league by saying and thinking this. So a word of advice, just don't. Let's talk about the second half of that, but use Daniel's thing. He said G2 does not equal all of the West. G2 stand alone with their power at the moment, in my opinion. The West still has a huge amount of work to do to prove themselves as a region and shouldn't be piggybacking off of G2 success. So there's 2 things that I would say with this. One, for the conversation around the West, you have to separate North America and Europe. I know, like, I'm obviously wearing a G2 jersey. We all kind of like hop on the hype train for NA because it's like, hey, they speak the same language whenever they're playing. Like, we can pseudo hop onto that, and it's at least somewhat indicative. I know there's some people that are perma like, nah, screw Europe, screw EU, don't want anything for them. I just think League is more fun whenever Europe's competitive against international teams, and for the US and North America, we haven't proven that we could do that yet. So you can have your own opinions on that all you want, but specifying this to just Europe, I actually do think the power is distributed pretty evenly amongst the top teams there. Now, K-Corp and MKOI and, well, I'm just going to limit it to those 2. Those 2 have to prove themselves in an international series come MSI, come Worlds, to be able to put themselves there. But I think there's a legitimate argument with how much they push G2 on a domestic level that they could level up to the same extent on the international stage. Is that a guarantee? No, they have to prove themselves the way G2 now has. G2 is the only one that has earned that right. But to me, this does feel very similar to 2019, where we can see multiple teams from Europe pushing teams from other regions to the distance. Does that mean that they will all be able to close the gap? I don't know. Again, K Corp had a better record against G2 and scrims. So maybe K Corp is is going to be the squad that can do it. Who knows? Maybe Ben, is going to be able to beat Broken Blade, but for some reason, he's not going to be able to beat Kana. That could be a thing. We just don't know, and time will tell. But I agree, we do need to temper some expectations when it comes to Europe and everybody else, because it still, for the last 6 years, well, 7 years if you go to 2019, has just been G2. And arguably Caps if you include 2018 Fnatic, because again, Caps is Caps. Speaking of which, Misa has one. Knights is better than Caps, is better than Chovy. Also, I think there should be a better prize for first stand winner. I mean, that's just the results as we saw them this past weekend. I think in terms of clutch factor, I would probably agree that Knight is definitely the best of those three. Caps second, although Crap's floor is astronomically lower than anything we will ever see from Knight and Chovy. When Knight and Chovy are off, it will never look as hilariously bad as it does for Caps. And that's just part of being from the West. Our floor is way down here, but our ceiling can kind of get close-ish. And I would say Caps with this tournament has secured himself, because he is probably going to be the Hall of Legends inductee this year. He secured that one, and now it's much more difficult to make an argument against it for people, and I think it should be a lot more, secure in people's opinions on that. But I do want to use this moment to talk about Chovy from a fan hate perspective, because we talked about the team side and whether people will move on or not. I get people going at Chovy, and unlike a lot of the other media that say, oh, he's done all this, he earned respect, all this, he's also earned the choker narrative. Even though it's not necessarily him, it's his teams have earned that moniker. But there's a limit that people need to know, okay? You can't just sit here and say that Chovy sucks. He doesn't. He's one of the 3 best mid laners in the world without the shadow of a doubt. You can call somebody a choker or their team a choker while still acknowledging that. And that is something that I think is missed whenever a lot of people in esports shit talk. They just assume when you're talking to somebody, they're just bad. It's no, they can be good, but also falter in very specific moments. And you have to know how to banter right on that front, because otherwise then you're just being a dick and you're obnoxious with it. There's a very fine line with this that I understand many people in esports just don't know. Sure. But put some respect on Chovy's name. Also, still be willing to disrespect and talk your shit, but understand the base that you should be coming from with this type of stuff. I like this take though. This one's interesting. Carmen Sunnyboy said the trophy looks awful straight out of Valorant. Keep league trophies unique and badass. I need you around to tell that to people whenever I defended the old Tiffany Worlds trophy, because people came at me for a long period of time. That thing's ugly as shit. I liked it. I've, for the longest time, thought that one of the benefits that we had at LoL Esports is that there were certain elements that we took from sports. Not everything has to be, obviously. There's a downfall and a pit, or a pit to that. However, the trophy design, the minimalist, but also still very indicative of the esport that you're in and kind of giving those iconic looks. I love that. I don't think this trophy is a league trophy necessarily. I still like the look of it because I do like Valorant trophies. But if all of them went to this format, yeah, I would 100% agree that I'd have a problem. Taylor says, take Worlds to Brazil for a year with a proper size arena. They just got an extra MSI seed deservedly and will always tune up loud and proudly. Exactly what you want to see from a crowd. I will say, I'm going to talk about the Brazilian thing, as you might have seen on the ticker down below here, as well as the Worlds updates around New York City and a lot of the conversations about the LEC Online for a video on Wednesday. There's enough there for that to be its own separate thing. But I do want to note with this tournament again, this shows proof of concept to Riot that I guess they didn't get last year, that they should know going into 2027, wherever you host this, especially I know it's not going to come back to Brazil. I wish it would, because they deserve a proper event that's not just in the Riot Games arena there. You should be putting this in theaters, 2,000 to 3,000 people, something a little bit smaller, but something that can deliver the hype of an international event that it is deserved of. And Brazil, to their credit, had a fantastic show out. I love what they did with the analyst desk. I think from a like fan perspective watching in, this was one of the more fun, smaller league events that we've watched in a long period of time. It's way better than last year's first stand. Obviously, I got to watch the majority of it because it was in a time zone that was somewhat friendly for North America. Just also put it on prime time for us, please. I shouldn't have to be waking up at 9 a.m. for a final on East Coast time, for a final that is actually being played in their time at 10 a.m. Like, that's ridiculous. I've already been going for 26 minutes of filming. I'm not sure how this will drop down for editing, but I also just need to get to editing this and go. So this is going to be the final take for this one. Thank you to everybody that put in your takes for this. I promise I will keep doing these typically like once a month. I think is a great cadence for this type of video. We get enough unique takes. There's enough things going on that it keeps it interesting. So thank you all again. If I didn't get to your takes, be sure to put in the replies or the comments down below. I'll have the conversation around whatever you want, so long as it's not a topic that I said I'm going to cover on Wednesday. But it's Jozu said, I feel like G2 making finals was just what we needed for North America. Felt like viewership tailed off because we can't compete. I truly believe that this will motivate players and we could put up a good fight and put on a good showing. So here's the thing that I would just warn people with this, that we kind of touched on earlier about this only being G2, but from a North American fan point of view, our teams notably didn't do it all that good. There is some looming worry about the relative skill in NA, but this type of moment can be a massive positive where people from the West look at it and it energizes and reinvigorates, and you should be able to see that through content and beyond. I know this isn't necessarily going to go in a competitive direction for my take on this, but I agree. We need to utilize this energy and show it in as many different forms as we can, specifically content, to build out fan bases and try and get people to buy in that, yes, Worlds is going to be in our home soil this year. We want to make sure that we are loud and proud and repping our teams in the same way that Brazil did when they were on home soil for this event. This should be motivating for North American fans. You should look at this and see, okay, if somebody beyond just Korea themselves can beat Korea, why can't we do it too? Berserker had a quote earlier in this tournament that I will keep harping on because I think it's the perfect example of what is a problem with our region at points, where he said, I just don't know if we're going to be able to beat Korea. To which I would say, you need the mentality of Skewmont, who came out in here and said, shut up, bro. We can absolutely beat them. It's 3-0. I don't give a shit. Hell yeah. That's the mentality you need. A lot of that comes from younger talent that is fresher in the space, that hasn't been beaten down by years and years of bad results, and has that kind of youthful, what's the word for it? Not blissful ignorance, but just, I don't know. They look at things from a optimistic point of view, ever optimist. And that's what we need. And that comes from young talent, that comes from having the right people in the right places, identifying from an ownership level, from like the Steves, the Jacks, and beyond. You need passionate people who care and who have the ability as well to help fix some of these problems, and all work together using the resources that we got to try and get to that point. Because there is nothing stopping us from trying to get to the point where G2 is. We just have to work a lot harder. And that's just the truth. And if you're willing to put in the time and the effort and the hours, you can. Look, one of the biggest criticisms we had for North America is that our solo queue was shit. Like, absolutely terrible. And I'm a freaking nobody in the space. And somehow, like, we were able to organize something that cleaned up solo queue just a little bit. Try to identify, whether you're a player, a coach, a team, anything. Like, identify things that can help the North American League audience from a bigger picture in any meaningful way that you can, that like actually has some sort of tangible impact, or at least tries to have a tangible impact. If we can all make one or two choices that do that, maybe this region will be better for it in the long run, and those can stack and build on top of each other, and we go from there. But I hope it is a wake-up call for many in North America to say, you got to have the confidence, you got to have the ability, and you got to believe in yourself to get to that moment. And if you do, and the right people in positions of power take the right chances, anything's possible. Sorry, I know that got a bit rambly at the end, but I just wanted to do my NA Raw pride speech, because I know there's a lot of people that thought I was being negative over the last few days as we got eliminated. So I think that's the perfect little bow to wrap on everything for First Stand. I thoroughly enjoyed this tournament. I hope you did too. We resume domestic play literally next week, or like this upcoming weekend, for Europe, and then North America begins after, or the week after as well. Ton of stuff coming up. I'm getting a ton of text. I gotta go. I'll catch you all later. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Drop a like on the video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.